for joining us for a new edition of France in Focus. I'm Nadia Chabit, and this week you join us in front of one of Paris's main tourist attractions, Notre Dame Cathedral. But even here, affluence is lower than in previous years, as France's tourism industry faces a rare downturn as a result of the threat of further terror attacks. Well, let's start with a look at the situation so far and how France is fighting back.
The home of the Eiffel Tower, riverboat cruises on the Seine and wide, sweeping boulevards. This is Paris, a global centre for fashion, culture and tourism. But more than a year after the country's deadliest terror attacks, the industry is suffering in the French capital. Tourism is down 8%, notably among Japanese, Russian and Italian visitors. Hotels, restaurants, museums and shops say they lost around €1 billion in turnover in the first half of 2016. Around 75,000 businesses employing some 500,000 people have been feeling the squeeze. Elsewhere in France, tourism's on the rise in places like Lyon or along the Atlantic coast. But again, there have been fewer people heading to the French Riviera since the deadly Nice attack in July. Many in the sector are now sounding a red alert. Local governments in the Île-de-France region have earmarked an extra €23 million for next year. The French government also promised €42 million for the sector, 10 million of which will go into a multilingual social media campaign to promote France abroad and remind potential visitors of the romance that makes the country one of the world's top tourist destinations.
Well, add to the ongoing terror threat a recent spate of headline-grabbing robberies and muggings, and you'll understand why security has become a top priority. As you can see from the police presence behind me, it's a policy that translates directly on the streets. Let's take a look at the measures taken to reassure visitors and entice them back.
The new Paris security guide comes in all languages. This is the Korean version. The Paris police spokeswoman gives tourists advice, mainly to avoid pickpockets.
Don't put your jacket or your bag on your seat, especially if someone's behind you.
Several tourists have recently been violently robbed in Paris. Kim Kardashian was brutally attacked, held at gunpoint in a Paris apartment last month. A high-profile case that worsened tourist concerns. More recently, Qatari tourists were carjacked on a highway. Thieves are not the only threat. A year after the Paris terror attacks, authorities have taken a series of security measures which they presented to tourism professionals.
France has proved since 2015 that it can manage big crowds of tourists. It handled the COP21 event well and also the European Championships.
After the attack on the Bataclan, France bolstered security around concert halls, injecting €4 million into the plan. Security checks begin long ahead of the event. They include bag and car searches. Everyone has to go through metal detectors. But no one is complaining.
With everything that's happened, we're all a bit stressed. Being searched is reassuring.
It's useful because it can prevent some people, but if someone is determined to get in and attack, these security measures won't stop it.
Security officers are often unarmed, but that doesn't stop candidates from trying to join protection services. This is one of the centers where they've been getting specific training with a new self-defense course.
You have to drop. Got it? Move back and reload.
Are all these measures enough to bring tourists back? Not necessarily, say the sector's professionals. They say that on top of making Paris safe again, authorities now have to improve its image.
The security plan should be part of a bigger plan whose goal is to make Paris attractive for tourists again.
Not an easy task. France's government says security threats are still as high as ever.
Well, going against the grain is one group of holidaymakers, apparently undaunted by the risk of attacks. Indian tourists are flocking to France in ever-growing numbers, often on business. As a result, French travel agents have made the Indian market one of their main focuses.
It's these tourists' first time in Paris.
The city of love. My name is
Everyone on the bus is from India and they have only 2 days to explore the French capital. Most of the top sites are on the agenda, including a boat tour of the River Seine. Several years ago, the city saw a rise in the number of Chinese tourists visiting. Now it's the Indians.
Multicolor of trees and buildings, very old buildings.
In Paris, Indian tourists are up 6%.
It's quite famous. If you talk about France, people might not be knowing. But if you talk about Paris, yes, they know.
While American visitors are down, these tourists say they had no intention of changing their plans following a number of terror attacks in the past year.
No, we are not afraid because we are used to like this.
While on a business trip to Germany, this group was offered a stopover in Paris, and it's Moita Gupta's job to ensure it's memorable.
They're going to come back with their relatives. Now that they've tasted it and they've seen it, they're interested. So they'll come back with their children and wives.
In 2015, more than 500,000 Indians visited France. That's 45% more than the previous year. And for these tourists, the city's not just home to the Eiffel Tower and the Mona Lisa. There's also shopping to be done. The group are especially on the lookout for authentically French items rarely found in India. Cultural differences become more pronounced at the till. In this department store, there's no bargaining on the price.
How much discount? No discount. No discount?
No, not possible.
Okay. Yeah. Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup.
But the director says there's already a system in place to deal with any misunderstandings.
We make advance arrangements with our colleagues who speak Hindi, who would be sensitive to their needs, to help them. We've doubled our workforce, so they become clients who come back to Paris.
Or in some cases, it's the countryside that draws in Indian tourists, a largely elite clientele. Lucy is in charge of looking after the group and providing the highest quality assistance. And today she's preparing a chateau in the region of Chantilly.
One thing's for sure, every meal has to be vegetarian. They haven't been out of their country for that long, so they have to be able to discover, without it being overwhelming.
This estate was even used as a location in a well-known Bollywood film about finding love in France. Its trailer alone has been watched in India around 14 million times, a vast audience entranced by the idealized, romantic and picture-perfect image of France.
Nadia jamais je t'aime.
Nadia jamais je t'aime. Ah, so sexy.
Now, they say the best way to a person's affections is through their stomach, so perhaps France is particularly well placed to fend off fear and win back hearts and minds. With its reputation for fine dining, the country remains a magnet for so-called gastro-tourism. From cooking classes to food shopping expeditions, France has it covered. And if you'd rather just sit down to the perfect dining experience, then why not combine that with a tour of the sites, like here, with the Bistronome, a veritable restaurant on wheels. Let's hop on board.
Adding some spice to classic Parisian scenes. This double-decker bus takes dining tables full of tourists around the city, past well-known sites like the Louvre and Notre Dame. To set the 38 covers and make sure nothing falls over during the trip, organizers had to get creative. This family from Kuwait was completely won over.
It's a very interesting idea. I mean, you get to see the entirety of Paris with all the main sites while having a very nice meal.
For a history lesson, all guests have to do is point their audio guides at a map and take a listen. On the bottom floor, staff race against the clock to create 6 dishes per person in less than 2 hours.
The base of all our meals are made in the lab. Here in the bus, we do the cooking and add finishing touches, including presentation.
The Bistronomie isn't the only Paris attraction that offers a unique dining experience. In this small cellar, a group of tourists is introduced to French specialties.
What does it smell like? Under the wood or open field? Under the wood. Everybody agrees.
Before getting to the tasting, the visit consists of buying the products one by one. And on the cobblestone streets of Montmartre, visitors become master quality hunters.
I don't give them a fish, I teach them to go fishing. I make sure they're capable of buying their groceries at places where they know the food will be high quality.
Learning to recognize the window of an artisan, or understanding a bit more about his work. The advice is simple, but welcome.
Everything being freshly cooked and freshly produced, this is a thought that we don't have in my country, so it's very surprisingly for me.
But the eccentric comes at a price. Whether on foot or seated, foodies must be prepared to spend more than 90 euros to fully savor Paris.
Well, that's where we're leaving this edition. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to France 24.